One of the things that's so confusing to me is that they didn't even like Pac. So for them to do, a documentary or everything on Pac, that's strictly business.
Yeah, he was scared. Yes, I agree. I do agree that he was probably terrified for his life. So if that is the case, it's also quite feasible that he put up money to get Pac killed.
We open where the story fractures open again with the most explosive allegation yet, and we do not slow down. In late 2025, with Dwayne Keefe D. Davis finally in custody and facing a first-degree fatal charge for the 1996 shooting of Shakur, insiders say he flipped and began cooperating with the FBI, revealing details that could upend how we understand one of the most notorious tragedies in music history. This is not idle rumor. This is the same Keefe D who gave prosecutors and federal agents his own words from a 2008 LA police interview and his 2019 memoir Compton Street Legend. And now sources familiar with the case allege he has gone further, naming new figures in the chain of command behind the fatal 1996 ambush. The name that has everyone talking in industry corridors and justice circles is Snoop Dogg, long seen as an icon of West Coast culture, now whispered to be entangled more deeply than the public ever knew. That revelation alone would have sent shock waves through every hip-hop fan community in the world. But the context, the decades of unresolved questions, the official silence, the half-remembered interviews and public boasts makes this feel like something long buried finally gnawing its way into daylight. We can feel the urgency in how fast the messaging around this is spreading, how quickly every faction is mobilizing to respond. Other reason we asked everyone to be here today is obviously we are the new attorneys for Dwayne Davis in the Tupac case, now set for trial of February of next year. The reason in particular that we asked the media to be here is that obviously we're not trying the case in the media, but we want to establish better relations with the media. We can trace back where Keefe's own admissions first cracked open a cold case that sat dormant for nearly 3 decades. He was publicly known to police as a suspect almost from the moment Shakur was shot on September 7, 1996 in Las Vegas. Yet, no charges came until September 29, 2023, when Las Vegas authorities finally charged him after re-examining statements he made publicly and in media. Lieutenant Jason Johansson explained that it was Davis's own voluntary comments and interviews and his memoir that led to the case being reinvigorated. In Death Row Chronicles on Bet in 2018, he said, in his words, that he was in the Cadillac that pulled up beside Shakur and Suge Knight's BMW before shots rang out. He didn't claim to have pulled the trigger that he placed on his nephew, Orlando "Baby Lane" Anderson, but he clearly placed himself at the nerve center of the plot. That narrative alone reframed an incident that for years felt like a phantom, unseen and unresolved. But now, as we watch filings from prosecutors overseen by the Clark County District Attorney's Office tease new allegations, every line of those old confessions feels like a thread pulling us into a far more complex web. The idea here is that the state has the burden of proving it beyond reasonable doubt. We don't think that they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Also just to go back a second. About what was seized, also what was mentioned was, some memorabilia, posters of Tupac and things like that, which we don't really think has a lot of evidentiary value. But, the boldest thread, the one now at the center of speculation and quiet outrage, is that Keefe D., once the shot caller of a Southside Crips faction and long a figure on the periphery of this story. They have provided information to the FBI linking Snoop Dogg to the orchestration of Shakur's fatal shooting. Snoop has long enjoyed a carefully curated public image, a legacy built on chart dominance and cultural influence. Yet, sources say that in closed conversations with federal agents, Keefe D discussed meetings and motivations that placed Snoop not on the sidelines, but as a possible customer of the hit, allegedly part of the plan to handle Shakur and Suge Knight. Industry insiders were stunned by the suggestion when word first trickled out. If true, this is not only a monumental scandal for a globally recognized artist, but a seismic shift in how we contextualize the East Coast-West Coast era rivalry, once framed largely around Diddy Biggie Shakur and Death Row versus Bad Boy Records. Now, Snoop's name bristles at the center of renewed legal scrutiny. We have to restate what is verifiable while acknowledging how quickly this feeds suspicion. There was a great deal of documents that were taken. You know, in Mr. Wilson's initial press conference, he had stated that our client is presumed innocent, and that's obviously a constitutional protection that every defendant enjoys. However, he had said that just recently they had come upon evidence that they felt basically corroborated their theory of the case and had made reference to this. In 2008, Keefe spoke to Los Angeles police under an immunity offer in a PCP ring case, and his statements were later published in the book about the case by former Detective Greg Kading and detailed in LA Weekly's coverage. In those conversations, he admitted supplying the Glock 40 that was used in the shooting and said that if the cars had been reversed, he would have fired the shot himself. Those admissions, once treated as confessions with limited legal consequence, have become, with modern filings and his arrest, the backbone of a living case narrative. His repeated outline of a meeting at Greenblatt's Deli, where he claimed he discussed a bounty with Sean Diddy Combs, was long dismissed by Combs's representatives as fiction and completely ridiculous. Yet that version of events resurfaced with force in prosecutors' filings, and now has allegedly expanded in what federal sources say he is telling agents about other names and motivations within the industry and legal community. This has created a new type of tension. Snoop, according to multiple people we've spoken to behind the scenes, has been closely monitoring how these filings are interpreted. When you get to be the age that we at and you get to become as successful as we are, you have to start doing some things that matter for the future. His representatives publicly deny any involvement in orchestrating the 1996 shooting, and Las Vegas police have reiterated that Snoop has never been formally considered a suspect in the homicide investigation. But the fact that these allegations are entering federal conversations at all changes the stakes. Snoop is currently navigating his own legal challenges on unrelated federal charges, including convictions on 2 counts of transportation to engage in improper conduct and awaiting sentencing. Industry observers note how damaging it would be if someone in custody, especially a longtime figure like Keefe, begins nomming high-profile figures in connection with the Shakur shooting, which has haunted hip-hop and justice narratives for nearly 30 years. Humans are not just good and bad, black and white. They're compassionate at times. They're at times. A man can be and compassionate to women at the same time. I want look at the moon. Take a look at Brother Got Better. We can see how this revelation reframes long-standing rivalries and unresolved mysteries. For decades, the official story, or lack thereof, left families, fans, and cultural commentators with fragments. The ambush at a Vegas intersection just blocks off the strip after a boxing match. The .40 caliber Glock fired in multiple rounds, Shakur's critical injuries, and Suge Knight's close escape. Over the years, alternative theories circulated. Some focused on gang retaliation, others on record label wars, personal vendettas, or misguided loyalties. Now, if federal investigators are examining whisper lines that touch Snoop Dogg's name in connection with financial motivation or indirect encouragement, what was once considered fringe is suddenly thrust into the heart of the official labyrinth. Sources close to prosecutors insist they are cautious, saying that all allegations must be vetted and that mere mention in interviews does not equal evidence of culpability. Yet in the court of public perception, every hint, every insider account slides into narrative urgency. Meanwhile, former Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight, who was present that night and survived with a graze wound, continues to add fuel to the fire. We play by the rules. You got a lot of people playing both sides of the fence, but at the same time, if your name should Knight, the authorities never going to treat you fair. My whole case in this case wasn't treated fair. From his prison cell, he has repeatedly claimed that others were involved. And in recent conversations with media outlets, he even suggested that people close to the case are trying to quietly secure Keefe's release because they fear what he might reveal. Whether that extends to whispers about Snoop's purported motivation remains unverified, but it illustrates how many layers of suspicion have accumulated around this story. In discussing how these insider narratives are circulating, we watch how they pull apart old assumptions and build new ones. The very idea that someone once loyal to the street code might now be talking to federal agents is reshaping how we think about complicity, loyalty, and self-preservation. As we dig into the timelines and compare what was once public with what is now emerging behind closed doors, the question becomes not just who knew what, but what will happen if these statements made to investigators become part of formal evidence?